So I see Pure Gosu right here. Plus comics are kind of down priced right now. So that's actually something else that I want to talk about a little bit. And let's see if I can figure out how to do this correctly. Because I have a couple slides. So you saw I had the comic market on there as well. And so the way that I approach my evaluation of the comic market, it's a little obscure, but what I like to do is I'm basically leveraging the information that I'm already capturing from my weekly Heritage Comic Auction tracking. So every week, you know, I've talked about this a number of times when I do like my top 10 list, that kind of thing. There's the weekly Heritage Comic Auction, and I track usually between about 150 and 200 books per week across modern, bronze, gold, and silver. They don't have a Copper Age category, so that's how it's just broken out by heritage. That's what I track. And so what I do is each week I track the new high sales that happen for each one of these books. I also track if the book beats or fails to beat my sales estimate, my price estimate, and if it exceeds it or fails to exceed it by a large threshold, which I set at 20%. And so the interesting thing is that I'm buddies with Swaggle House Comics, and so we talk a lot about this, and he has his silver and bronze age, and I think he has a copper one now too, like charts that he's put together where he is tracking the comic market using that. And the interesting thing is his is a much more direct way of measuring it, and he comes up with effectively the same results that I see with my little more obscure way of doing it. And so I'm going to share that screen. Let's see here.
2,000 years later.
All right, so here you can see this. So this is what I show when I do my videos where I'm talking about the comic market, and that's part of it. I haven't made one for a while, and I thought this would be a good chance for me to throw this into a live stream. And so these are the charts that I make that I share when I'm doing this. I have tons of spreadsheets, you know, where I have every single week. I haven't missed a Heritage Comic Auction in over 2 years. I think about, well over, I haven't missed them in about 4 years, but I've been tracking this data very seriously for about 2 years now. And so what all these lines are is the blue line is the percentage of the books that exceeded my estimate. And so the way that I look at this is that if everything is as expected, it should be hovering around 50%. That means that I am estimating the prices and they are beating them or failing to beat them an equal amount of times. Because when you're estimating prices, you're not going to get the number exactly right ever. I mean, there's a range that these books sell in. But if things are going smoothly, I figure it should be around 50%. Then I have this red line here. The red line is the percentage of sales that are new highs. Then I have this green line, which is the percentage of sales that beat my estimate by 20% or more. Then I have the purple line, which is the percentage of sales that fail to beat my estimate by 20% or more. So say a book I'd estimated as $100 and it sold for 120, it's going to be on this, or more, it's going to be on this green line. If it sold for 80 or less, it's going to be on the purple line. And so one of the interesting things I've always liked with that is that it kind of shows you the times a year when it's maybe really, you find a lot more deals. And that's when the purple line gets above the green line. But let's go back to what I'm talking about here with how the comic market has been performing. And so you can see back here at the very start, where you can see my mouse over this, back in early 2021, it was up to 60% of books were beating my estimate, and they were consistently over that for a while. I didn't catch the very beginning of the year, which I wish I would have, but this is when I started to notice that everything was going crazy, and I was like, I should start tracking this information. And you can see it then went down, and we have these little flows where it just touches 50 and then it trends down again. And basically what this is saying is that for the majority of the last 2 years, the averages have been below my estimates. And that's why we've seen, and that's what we've seen with prices. We've seen prices dropping almost pretty consistently for about 2 years since the peak, or about a year and a half since that peak. But one of the interesting things that I've noticed over the last 8 weeks, and this has been the longest stretch that I've seen this. So this started basically right at Thanksgiving, and it's continued since then. It's just been a constant, strong sales trend, where I've been seeing consistently the book selling for about 50%, beating my estimate about 50% of the time or more. You can see I had a couple of weeks that were quite a bit higher, where it got up in these, bigger numbers here. And so really for the last like 8 weeks or so, I've been seeing some really strong sales. And now I know that some people say that because of tax returns and that kind of stuff, you'll see jumps early on in the year. But I would generally expect that to be kind of March, April timeframe when people are starting to get that back. And this started back in November. And so this doesn't necessarily mean that prices are going up, but it means that comics are selling for around what I would expect them to. And so that means that, to me, it means prices are stabilizing for now. Now, the problem is every time I seem to make a video and I talk about this, then I start to see this downtrend afterwards. So we'll see if that happens again. But at least for now, prices have been pretty consistently stable for about the last 8 weeks. You can also see there's been some jumps in the new highs. That one's not, you can't draw really as many conclusions from the new high sales. That's why I don't talk about that one nearly as much anymore, except that I thought it was really interesting that back in the early comic boom, 50% of books that were selling for new records. I mean, this was the thing that if you saw this, this should have been alarming. This is crazy that basically every time a book was coming up for sale, half the time it was setting a new record. That was just nuts. And that's really come down quite a bit. And I have that broken out by age as well. But so now it's much lower. It's usually below 10% for gold, silver, or for bronze, silver, and modern. Gold, because they don't sell as often, you do still see new highs quite a bit. That's usually the driving factor in this. But now let's move on to the next one. This chart is a little bit messy, and so I've broken it out by age later on. But so this is the percentage of sales that are exceeding my estimates, broken out by the age of the comics, where the yellow line is gold, the brown line is bronze, the black line is modern, and the silver line is silver. The gray line is silver. And so let's jump to the golden age. And so you can see this one. Golden Age has consistently been exceeding my estimates for 2 years. And that's one of the things that I've just noticed that has been a trend that I have been following for a while now, is that Golden Age just continues to perform strong. Now, because this isn't that they're necessarily setting new records or anything, they're just beating my estimates, which means on average, they are trending up consistently. And so, like I said, that's generally around 65% of the time. I mean, that is really, really strong. It has dipped below 50% on individual weeks a couple times, but this number is averaged over 3 weeks. And so that's just to smooth it out a little bit. But it's never actually dipped below the 50% with one of the average points. But yeah, Golden Age consistently really, really strong. And that's one of the reasons why I talk about it, why it's just been one of those really impressive areas to me for how comics have performed. Now we go to Silver Age. I mean, look at that difference there. I mean, huge difference. And so the Silver Age, you can see it had already started tanking when I started tracking this in about April of 2021. And it got down to the point where it was about 15% of sales were beating my estimates. I mean, prices were just dropping and dropping and dropping. And you can see over this last time period, it has only touched that 50% mark twice. One time was back in the middle of the summer of last year, and we were seeing some pretty strong sales last year. And now, so basically in the last few weeks, it has crossed that again. And so that's why, to me, this has been something that's really interesting, is that it's not just the Golden Age that's performing well right now. The Silver Age has stabilized in a lot of books. It doesn't mean that every book has, just like we saw with the comic boom, every book didn't jump at the exact same time. It happened over a pretty wide range of time. You had different books going up at different times, and then you had different books dropping at different times. But at least now it seems that a lot of those books maybe have gotten down to a point where people are like, this is low enough, I am ready to buy again. And for a lot of it, it's been that basically the comic boom period, it's like it didn't happen. That's really how you look at it. If you look at the charts on GPA, it's like the comic boom didn't happen. So that's Silver Age. And then we've got the Bronze Age. It looks very similar actually to the Silver Age. It was still up a little bit, when I first started tracking, and then it fell down pretty hard and then was below and only crossed that 50% mark one time as well until recently, until about these last 8 weeks. It has crossed that line again, and it seems like maybe Bronze Age is stabilizing a little bit as well. And then the last one here is Modern. Now, Moderns tend to stick around my average point a little better because they sell so much more often. It means that you're going to be pretty accurate, or you can be pretty accurate on your sales because you have recent sales data. And so you can see it does tend to hit that 50% mark a little more regularly. But again, it has started performing more consistently as well over these last 8 weeks. So that's just kind of what I wanted to point out with the comic market, is that, you know, the golden age really had been carrying a lot of these numbers for the last 2 years with this really strong, consistent data. But Silver Age, Bronze Age, and Modern over the last 8 weeks have all stabilized pretty well. And so it's just something that's interesting to me, and that I'm definitely watching to see if this continues or if things start to get cheaper again. I can't say for sure, but I have noticed that a lot of books really have gotten back down near where they were prior to the comic boom. And so I think that's at least making people more comfortable in purchasing things again. Werewolf, yeah. So Werewolf by Night 32, that's actually one, we can talk about that a little bit too. So Werewolf by Night 32 is definitely one that I think has really gotten down to the point where if you're looking for that book, now is the time to be really watching it. You know, it's a lot of the prices have gotten down to where the book was prior to the comic boom or lower. So, I mean, let's look at the 7.5, February 2023. I mean, the way that I look at it is that I basically try to, in my mind, I'm extending a line out from here, because even if we didn't have the comic boom, generally, and not always, sometimes comics are flat, sometimes they go down, but generally they trend up over time. And so if you follow that general trend that's been going on for a number of years, it's basically where the book is right now, you know. And so if you're getting the book around this price, you know, around $1,400 to $1,500 for 7.5 in this case, then that's around probably where the book is at. And it may go down a little more, but I would feel at least relatively safe there. You know, like someone paid $4,000. A few people, it looks like, paid around $4,000. And yeah, maybe the book gets to that price like out here, you know, like, I mean, maybe 10 years from now, something like that, it's at that price. But there's a long time, I think, before the book will see these types of prices again. But where it's sitting right now, where a lot of these sales are happening, this is an example of one that I think is relatively safe to purchase. But I mean, there are some books like Avengers 196, the first Taskmaster, that one's dropped below where it was. I mean, it's like there was such a negative reaction to the portrayal in the Black Widow movie that it's like it hurt the book more than if the movie had never happened and the comic boom had never happened. And so there are some where you could, nothing is guaranteed, you know, anything could go down more, but it's at least your risk feels relatively low there. So I thought the other thing that might be interesting here is to check out some of these other books that sold, because I'm interested to see, you know, how some other books in this auction actually performed. So let's go down to the bottom here, because the first book was this Action 86. And pretty cool World War II cover, went for $900. I had this one estimated at $700. And so kind of just an example of these early action, early detective comics, early Supermans, Batmans, they generally are performing pretty well. And that's why when I saw those early Batmans that looked like they were underperforming, I was really paying attention, because you don't get opportunities like that very often. And so I definitely wanted to jump on that. But let's see, what are some other ones that sold that look like they're pretty interesting? Because there were some high grade Spider-Mans as well. There was a 9.0 of Amazing Spider-Man number 12. And so that was 15016. So that one went for 28.8. And so I had that one, I had estimated that at 2,600 or 2,650. And so it beat that. That's actually one of the trends I've really noticed. And I was talking about this with a couple people that I'm in chats with on Instagram, is that one of the areas that had really been dragging down the Silver Age and Bronze Age sales numbers that I had was Amazing Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man has been underperforming for, I mean, at least a year. And over the last few weeks, one of the things I've really noticed is that Amazing Spider-Man books have been meeting and exceeding my estimates a lot more lately. And so that's one of the things that's really helped pick this back up. And I think that it's just Amazing Spider-Man, especially Silver Age Amazing Spider-Man, is one of the most in-demand types of comic books out there. There are so many people that are putting runs together of this book that there's always people that want to pick up these books. And they just had been getting cheaper and cheaper. And I think they finally have largely reached that point where people are just like, this is too cheap again. I'm going to buy these. And yeah, I mean, 2,800 isn't cheap, but this is a pretty high grade, Amazing Spider-Man number 12, it's a 9.0. You don't have to spend $2,800 to get this book, but it's just an example of that where, these books have just, I think they've gone down enough that in a lot of cases, people have just decided I'm ready to pick that up again. But let's see. There was a 9.2 of Amazing Spider-Man 37. So this one, I had estimated this one would go for 1,300 and went for 1,440. So just another example where they just seem to keep beating my estimates a lot more, and they really weren't before. Let's see. Oh, there was a really big sale, I think, on a pre-code horror book that sold earlier in this auction. It's 15. This one surprised me because this isn't one of the real popular covers from this title. Astonishing has some amazing covers, and this one isn't one of the really popular ones, but 1,560 for a 5.5, that is a really, really strong sale. I had that estimated at 750. So this more than doubled my estimate. So, I mean, let's take a look at that. Astonishing number 6. So this is an Atlas, and that's one of the areas I've talked about as well. Atlas pre-code horror, I feel like, has been really undervalued. But okay, so here we go. So it's not like it sells all that often. So pricing, it's not like it's easy, but this was a 5.5. And so what I was looking at, the most recent sale, September of last year, was a 3.5 that went for $443. And so this sold for about 20% above, $100 per point. So I said for a 5.5, it's probably maybe a little stronger because it's a higher grade copy. And so I said 750. So that was like 35% above its, its price per point, and well above where, I mean, he had a 4.5 that went for 492 in April of 2021, that kind of thing. And so, I mean, 1,560, that is a really, really big sale for that. Let's see what the census looks like. There we go. So the census for this one, 32 on census. There are 5, 6, 7 graded higher. But this is the type of sale where if you have this book, if there are more of them out there, and again, it's not like a book that's going to be super common. It's 1951, it's Atlas. But if there are more of them out there, that $1,560 sale is going to pull them out. Like, people are going to get that book graded if they saw that sale, because I mean, look at here, like a 6.0, a 7.0 6 years ago was going for $250. There's not a lot of motivation to get a book graded when it's selling for $250. But when a book is selling for $1,500, there's a lot more motivation to get it graded, because people want that. When you're spending that much, they want that confirmation that the book doesn't have any restoration and, all that kind of stuff. It's complete. So that was definitely this astonishing number 6. I saw that one earlier today, and that was a pretty big sale. Now, there's also just a cool book that I saw come up that I don't see come up for sale all that often in this grade. Was this one here, this first Deathlock in a 9.8, Astonishing Tales 25 and a 9.8 white pages. I don't see the 9.8. I see 9.6s, 9.4s quite a bit, but I don't see 9.8s very often. And I had estimated this one would go for 2,600, went for 3,120. But to kind of put that in perspective, this book had a high sale of $6,700. This book peaked at $6,700. So it's not like this is setting records, but it is getting back to where it's beating sales that had been at previously. More recently, it's actually stabilizing. That's what I'm seeing. It's stabilization of prices. It's not setting new records, but it's stabilization of prices. And that's what I was talking about earlier with the comic market stuff.